Hello, I'm Oliver Pickard and welcome to beautiful Limousin, France, and this beautiful diffused glow that's shining down upon me and the pillar drill this morning. The reason why it's shining on the pillar drill is because I'm going to be using this tool to make another tool today. A pillar drill is one of the best tools that you can have in any home workshop or garage. The reason for that is it's much more precise than a hand drill. A hand drill's fine, but when you lean on it, especially to drill metal, you tend to lean one way or another and then things don't quite fit together properly. Whereas a pillar drill allows for beautiful, repeatable results, and then you know because everything's square, it's all going to fit together in the end. And I'm going to be using this tool today to make a tubing notcher. Now, a tubing notcher is basically a big protractor. You know those plastic protractors that you use when you were at school that allow you to do stuff on an angle? Basically that. It's a big protractor, but it has a drill at one end with a hole saw, which looks like that. And it has a clamp at the other side for holding tubing. Now, what we use a tubing notcher for is to notch tubing, duh. But why do we need to notch tubing? Well, when you have one piece of tubing, this is a hole saw, but it's my tubing analog because it's round. But whenever you need to fit one thing that's round to another thing that's round, obviously you need to cut a piece out. You need to cut a rounded profile out so that they sit together like that beautifully, and then they can be welded together. That's what a tubing notcher does. It cuts that precise angle out. Now, tubing notchers are really expensive. They're about 150 quid. And I couldn't find any I was really happy with the quality of. Plus, they all use a hand drill. And a hand drill's fine, but they're not really speed controllable and they don't have a bunch of torque. And it pretty much, by the time you've built a roll cage, you're going to be buying a new drill because it's going to wear your drill out, because these big hole saws put a lot of torque into your drill as well as into the tubing. So rather than spending 150 quid plus burning my drill out, I decided instead we were going to make one, and it makes for a good video. Now, you don't necessarily need a tube notcher. If you have enough time and patience, it is possible to use a round file, like a half moon file, and a grinder and a flappy bit, and patiently cut out and trim and keep trying the piece of tubing until you get a really nice fit. And it's something that I've done in the past myself, but it's not massively repeatable. And when you're making a roll cage, you need one side of the roll cage to be exactly the same as the other. You don't want slight differences. You don't want, it's not really repeatable when you're doing it by hand. And this is one of the things that a lot of people don't understand. You don't necessarily need big machines to do these jobs, but all these machines and all this stuff just makes the working, it makes it faster. And I'm filming it, so I don't want to be spending 6 months to make a roll cage, but also I don't want to be spending 6 months to make this video for you. So because I'm doing two things at the same time, we need a tubing notcher. Now, the other part of a tubing notcher, other than the notcher itself, is you're going to need a really good hole saw. Now, we can make our own tubing notcher, but we can't make our own hole saw, and I'm using Starrett. This isn't a paid promotion. I wish Starrett would have paid for these because they're really, really expensive. But I'm using Starrett hole saws. The reason why I'm using a really good quality arbor, which is the thing that holds the hole saw, but the reason why I'm using Starrett hole saws is because I bought one about 7 or 8 years ago now, and I'm still using it. And I used to drill stainless steel all the time, which just destroys hole saws. And I was very used to the practice of buying reasonably expensive hole saws, using them once or twice, and then throwing them in a bin because you can't really sharpen a hole saw. But I bought a Starrett hole saw from a shop that way overcharged me. I paid like 40 euros for it, something 45 euros, but I've still got it to this day, and it was good value even at that ridiculous price. So I've ordered two Starrett hole saws, and that's what I'm going to be using to cut my angles in my tubing. Now, if you're going to be using, if you're making like a bicycle frame or something like that, then a big hole saw like this with big teeth isn't really ideal. If you're going to be using really thin tubing, you're going to need a hole saw that has super fine teeth. But for making a roll cage, these pretty much are the best hole saws money can buy, and they're made in England, which is good, rather than them being made somewhere in Asia and not knowing whether the people who made them got paid properly or not. We can buy quality with confidence, and I always like doing that. Buy well and make it last. Now, we've talked about the drill end of our tubing notcher, but we also need a secure clamp, something that's strong enough to hold our tubing without moving, but also isn't going to damage the tubing. So aluminium would be perfect, nylon would work just fine, but I'm going to be using this 500-year-old piece of oak. The reason why I'm going to be using a piece of 500-year-old oak is I have it. This stuff's about as strong as steel, and it's a bit of a pain to use. It's a bit of a pain to machine because it's so strong. And I've already machined it up so it's perfectly square in every single direction. But if you're going to be making a tubing notch at home, I don't advise that you use a 500-year-old piece of oak because it's incredibly expensive, is this stuff. But I just happen to have loads of really old oak because I'm building a barn. Well, I'm not building a barn, I'm turning a barn into a house. And this was part of an old roof beam that was damaged. And I've replaced it with one that wasn't damaged, but this was a good bit. So I saved this good bit, and now it's going to become a tubing notcher. To make it into a tubing notcher, I need to drill an exactly 40mm hole through it. Now, years and years ago, you would have used one of these, and this is a spade drill. And spade drills are a bit naff. Actually, this is a very pretty spade drill because it's gold, bro. But drilling through a piece of oak with a spade drill works until you get to the very end. And spade drills like to make a mess as they leave. They're not very good house guests. But when you're drilling through the hole, it gets to the end and then it blows a big, ugly, splintery mess out the back of the hole. But we have a new invention. This is basically space-age carpentry. By that I mean it wasn't invented by the ancient Egyptians. But these are a reasonably recent invention. And this is a Forstner bit. And Forstner bits are beautiful because they will machine all the way through this block of oak and then come out the other side cleanly. I've got a full set here. I bought these for my dad as a Christmas present a few years ago because I'm the best son ever. Tools are a really good idea as Christmas presents. My family, if you're listening to this, tools are so are car parts actually. Tools and car parts, I don't need socks. So the way our tubing notch is going to work is that I've centre popped a little centre pop mark in the centre of the vise that lives on the pillar drill, and this will be bolted into place with the centre pop mark directly in line with the drill bit for our hole saw. I've also scribed a line down the centre of our piece of oak that I haven't drilled the hole in yet, so that when I put my piece of oak in the vise, it will be directly in line with the centre pop mark. So everything then is central and lined up and then can be clamped into place. So the vise is going to be tied down onto the bed of the pillar drill, and the piece of oak will be clamped down and central to the vise. Now, how do we get our adjustment? Well, we have a protractor on the bed of the pillar drill. So this bed actually tilts, and it tilts perfectly in noted degrees on the side, which means that I can make repeatable cuts. So I can make the left hand side notches of my roll cage identical to the right hand side, because everything is centered and everything is, like I say, it's repeatable. And getting perfect repeatable results is the name of the game. So the next thing to do is to drill the hole in my piece of wood, the 40mm hole. Now it's important to note that I'm drilling into the end grain of my piece of wood, and that will prevent it from splitting or anything like that. It's literally the hardest direction in which to drill a piece of wood, but this will mean that when my tubing is held solid, that my piece of wood definitely isn't going to split. So the way you accurately zero in a Forstner bit on a piece of oak is there's a little tiny pointer in the center of the bit, and you line it up and you can press it down. When you lift it up, you'll find that there's a little tiny indent and you'll know that it's perfectly in line. Turn it on. Get it perfectly in line. This bit of wood, like the TARDIS, it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It took forever to drill for it, to readjust the bed of the drill about 3 times. But that's why Forstner bit's so awesome, because the finished back is as good as the front. Look at that. Whereas if I'd used a spade drill, all of this would be all blown out. Not bad for into 500-year-old end grain. So instead of bolting a bolt through the top or a grub screw to hold the piece of tubing in place, which would damage the piece of tubing, we're actually going to split this block and turn it into a hinged clamp. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to attach this stainless steel plate to one side, like that. We're going to put a hinge, I've got my hinge here, this hinge on the side, and then to actually hold it down and get our clamping strength, I'm going to use this. And this is a hatch retention screw from a yacht, because I've got it. And we're going to put the hatch retention screw on our block. And this is of course designed to be screwed into wood and designed to create tension to hold the hatch down and make it waterproof. And we're going to put that, cut a slot in here, put that on there like that, and that will allow us to tighten our block down onto our tubing without damaging our piece of tubing. So now we need to mark all this out, drill it, and fasten it all together. So this is the tubing that I'm going to be using for my roll cage. It's 40mm diameter and it's 2mm wall thickness. It's basically specifically for making roll cages with. And I need to chop a little bit off and then I can test my clamp. So now I can get my piece of test roll cage tubing. I can place it in my clamp, put the top on. And because of the thickness of the blade, I have a little bit of clearance for clamping force. And that's why it was so important to make the hole the same size as the outside diameter of my tubing. So it's a 40mm hole, it's 40mm tubing, and then my blade thickness allows for clamping force. Right, now all we need to do is measure up for our top plate and our hinge. This is why a pillar drill is such a good idea. So in here, there is a bunch of pulleys and belts. They're very similar to automotive belts. And there's a tensioner here. And you lift this tensioner up, and it moves the motor in. And that allows you to gear your drill speed down. In order to drill stainless steel, you need to slow your drill down. And actually, it's better to drill steel slower as well. The other thing that you need to remember when you drill stainless steel is always drill a pilot hole. So you drill a pilot hole first, and then you drill your bigger drill. If you're ever drilling anything hard, any hard steel or anything like that, go through it with a really fine drill bit first, and plenty of lubrication to keep it cool, and then afterwards go through it with a bigger drill bit. So many times people try and force through a bigger drill bit, and it's never worth doing. Slow your drill right down, and you want to use plenty of lube, a tiny drill bit first, and then afterwards just take that edge out with a bigger drill bit. Simple. now I've located all my holes for my plate, I need to cut a notch for this to go into, which is what that big hole was all about. And to do it, I'm using the bandsaw because it's easier than messing about with a vise and a hacksaw and all of that, because it is a vise and a hacksaw. Well, as usual, I got carried away making things pretty. But if I'm making something using stainless steel and chrome parts and brass, why not have it? Why not have it shiny? Why not have it like stunning? The thing is, there's something wonderful about making beautiful things using beautiful things. And it could have just been a tool, but now it's a joy to have in a workshop, and now I get to make a beautiful car with a beautiful tubing notcher. If I'm going to make my own tools, then I'm going to make the prettiest tools that I can, and I'm rather proud of this. Right, now to test it. Well, there we have it, the first test of my tubing notcher. And it's not quite perfect. It's about 1 millimetre out. I think there might be a bit of swarf stuck to the bottom of the vise. I didn't clean the bottom of the vise before we did this test, and maybe I should have. Well, I definitely should have, because it's 1 millimetre out. But I think that's what it is, because everything else is all zeroed in. But I'm really happy with it. I mean, I could trim that up with a file in 30 seconds and have it perfect, but it does sit as it is without messing. It sits perfectly fine up to a piece of tubing at 90 degrees, and that'd be perfect to weld with. So I'm really happy with it. I'm calling it a win. And don't forget that tubing notchers, not even a commercial grade one, but like the most basic Chinesiest of tubing notchers start at around 150 quid. And this little fella has cost me 6 screws and a gate hinge. The piece of yacht rigging I got for free and I've had in my toolbox for donkey's years. That piece of plate has been there for at least 7 years. And of course the piece of oak was from an old roof beam, which I got free with my house. Or I spent a fortune on a piece of roof beam to make a tubing notcher with and got a free house, whichever you want to choose. But I'm massively happy with it, and of course, because it's on a pillar drill, I'm not going to run into bearing issues. I'm not going to burn out a drill. I did have to, because of the big teeth on the starter bit, I did have to put the drill onto its slowest setting, but every single pillar drill I've ever owned or used has been on its slowest setting or had to be put on its slowest setting, so I'm not surprised in the least. But it did really well. I'm really happy with it. And of course, like pillar drills are designed to take much more of a kicking than a hand drill and on a piece of metal frame. So I'm going to try now to, not now, it's late in the day, but later in the week I want to shove it back and see if it'll cut on some obscure angles and and have a play around with it and get it really zeroed in. But that'll be all very boring and a lot of measuring and stuff, so you don't need to see that. So I'll say thank you to everyone who's watched this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down in the comment section below. If you're interested in any of my social media, that's all in the description. And if you want to support this channel and you have a friend who's building a roll cage or likes mechanical things or whatever, if you think anyone will be interested in these videos, please make sure you share them with your friends, because it's really important to me that these videos get out there and get seen by the people who will enjoy them. That's why I make them. I make them for your enjoyment, and I make them for, you know, the enjoyment of you and your friends and all that kind of thing. So thank you all for watching. And of course, there's the usual liking, commenting and subscribing, but you all do that stuff anyway. You're awesome. Thank you all for watching. Go and make beautiful things with beautiful things. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.